players are getting ready. As you say, Briska on the left, Sigman on the right. Briska currently 22nd in our Player of the Year race. Not really competing for the top spot for the season, but does have in his sights one of the end of the year at-large bids to the Players' Championship.
And Rudy is a New Brunswick, New Jersey resident, so very local to this tournament site. A person who is actually good friends with my younger brother before he even knew of my association to my younger brother. So.
All right, well, Rudy will be on the play. He starts off with a Scrubland into Deathrite Shaman, and now he'll know his opponent. Definitely a tell from his opponent. It is Ancient Tomb into Painter Servant.
And the red-white painter deck is very explosive and also can be quite redundant as well. There's a lot of backup ways for it to assemble a combo, mostly through Imperial Recruiter getting certain targets, but Goblin Welder is another backup element.
Speaking of redundancy, Sigman's hand pretty good here. He has the Grindstone, so he had the possibility for a turn 3 win there with Painter Servant and Grindstone. He also has a redundant pair of Blood Moons, which could be difficult for Rudy. Right now, there are no lands in the graveyard, so if Sigman sticks down one of these Blood Moons, he could just take Rudy off all his mana.
Yeah, Rudy is Deathblade, and that means no basic lands in this list, so he can either try to force a will he can try to force a will of Blood Moon, but by taking Grindstone, he's sort of accepted his fate here. He gets to use Deathrite Shaman potentially, although he's using that land right now to cast the Stoneforge Mystic. He has a couple of colorless spells left in his deck, a Batterskull and the Umezawa's Jitte you saw him just get. But if this Blood Moon sticks, most of Rudy's deck is shut off.
Yeah, and that's going to happen here. So Sigman's going to get a Blood Moon down. Briska basically will have to try to win the game with this 1-2, with a pair of 1-2s and an Umezawa's Jitte.
Yeah, possibly Batterskull could come into play here, but again, Rudy with not a lot of spells left in his deck he can cast.
Now, for the record, Painter Servant is set to blue. That's typical in the red-white Painter deck. What that allows is cards like main deck Pyroblast and main deck Red Elemental Blasts to become Vindicates in the matchup. So if Rudy gets this Jitte down, Zachary can simply Red Blast the Jitte if he finds one.
And it's not like playing Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast in your main deck is a huge cost in Legacy. Blue is by far the best color, and so it can do work even when Painter Servant isn't involved.
See another land for Sigman. Right now, all he had was some redundant Blood Moons. We'll see if he found an answer to this Jitte. We may see him slam the second Blood Moon. Let's see what he wants to do here. It's Sensei's Divining Top. And yeah, he's going to go ahead and actually pass with the Divining Top. Not trying to spin it to find a Red Blast. And well, Rudy's going to go to work. He's going to suit up he suits up the Deathrite Shaman with Umezawa's Jitte. Sigman spins the top. He does not find a Red Blast. He does see an O-Ring, however.
An Oblivion Ring is excellent here. Zachary, of course, can cast it off of the basic planes that he's found. And what this allows him to do is not block the Deathrite Shaman this turn. Oblivion Ring the Umezawa's Jitte the following turn. Then his Painter Servant is no longer at risk, and he can kind of win it at his leisure from there. The only card really left over in Rudy's deck that can be cast is a Batterskull, and Zachary could probably outrace that if it comes up.
He can probably raise it. To be honest, Zachary would have 4 Red Blasts and just the Divining Top to Rudy's 1 Batterskull. In the chance that Rudy finds Batterskull, Zach probably can find an answer to it first. Mm-hmm. We'll see that Oblivion Ring that he switched over to the top. He's actually going to go with Ensnaring Bridge. He does have a pair of cards in hand, though. This means that Rudy's going to be able to get in here, except Swords to Plowshares takes care of Deathrite Shaman.
And Swords to Plowshares is a nice play here from Zachary, because you never know if there's going to be some random way for a land to enter a graveyard, maybe by discarding a hand side or something. Better to cut off that Deathrite Shaman, even though it seems fairly low risk.
All right. And on top, he's going to go ahead and spin his top on upkeep. You see Faithless Looting, Oblivion Ring, and an unknown card. It's not a speed matchup. Zachary's playing what amounts to a prison strategy. He's just going to try to stop Rudy from playing Magic at all.
And this is a multi-dimensional prison strategy. I mean, you look at all this. There's 2 different soft locks in play in Blood Moon and Ensnaring Bridge, and many others smattered throughout the list. So this is a straight prison style deck.
We'll see it. I imagine he shuffles O-Ring to the top.
And the revised lands that Zachary is playing really taking me back to some my Winter Orb Kismet days.
Sure.
That kind of prison strategy. And yeah, Rudy's tapping. There's nothing left to be done here.
Yeah, Oblivion Ring. I don't think it matters whether it hits the GT or the Stoneforge. Oblivion Ring will close the door.
That is part of the charm of playing a deck like Red White Painter is over the course of the tournament, I don't know how many free Blood Moon wins you're going to get, but it's definitely greater than 0, where you have it on the second, possibly even the first turn with his most explosive draws, and your opponent's deck cannot function in the face of that. Rudy's Esper Deathblade list, one of those kind of decks.
Yeah, and Red White Painter wins quickly when it wins. It plays cards like 4X Simian Spirit Guide just to try to get all of its lock pieces, which generally cost 3. It wants to get them down a turn earlier.
Yeah. So Rudy's sideboard does not offer a lot to answer the card Blood Moon specifically. He has a Disenchant, a Divert, a Vendilion Click, a Spell Pierce, a Flusterstorm, another Force of Will, 3 in the main deck, and then the 4th one in the sideboard. 2 copies of Zealous Persecution, 2 copies of Abrupt Decay, a Supreme Verdict, 3 Surgical Extractions, and a Banishing Light. I think you're going to see basically the other removal spells kind of coming in this matchup. I think the 4th Force of Will does a lot of work here. The Disenchant, Zachary's trying to combo off through artifacts. Maybe the 2 copies of Abrupt Decay, they are a bit of a strain on the mana, but there's no end of targets in Zachary's list. The Banishing Light as well. So just more things that can answer the permanent-oriented nature of Zachary's combo deck.
All of Zach's combo pieces and lock pieces are permanents that cost 2 and 3, or 1 through 3. So these cards like Abrupt Decay, like Banishing Light, are very strong against his strategy.
But there's nothing that Rudy can really do about a Resolve Blood Moon. The sideboard does not offer him any reprieve. He doesn't have basic lands that he can bring in. He has his 4 copies of Force of Will. He's 3 Thoughtseizes. He can, float mana and Disenchant or Abrupt Decay before it enters play. But once it's there, if he doesn't have Deathrite Shaman, he's going to be locked up no differently than he was in the first game.
Yeah, one of the things, Rudy's playing the 4-color Esper Deathblade build. It's an Esper deck that stretches for Abrupt Decay out of the sideboard. One of the downsides to the deck is it does not play basic lands. And this is, I think, one of the matchups where he pays a price for that.
Absolutely. I mean, there is theoretically room for some basic lands. For example, there's 2 copies of Wasteland and a Creeping Tar Pit. Those aren't really strictly necessary from a mana fixing standpoint. Of course, Wasteland is a colorless land straight up. Creeping Tar Pit is blue and black, but it's more about having another equipment target than anything else. But when you have Deathrite Shaman in your deck, there's such an advantage to playing with Wasteland too, because you get to leverage your mana advantage. But the price that you pay for all of this is that Blood Moon and some similar cards like Price of Progress are very powerful against you, and that's what happened to Rudy in the first game.
So see, looking at Zach's sideboard, he has a 14-card sideboard, so a bunches of different one-ofs, seeing what he can bring in the matchup. A lot of them are just different lock pieces. He has Leyline of Sanctity, Pyroblast, Volcanic Fallout, Rest in Peace, Magus of the Moon, Swords to Plowshares, Wear Tear, Shattering Pulse, that's Shatter with Buyback, Pyroclasm, Emrakul, Spirit of the Labyrinth, Canonist, Red Blast, Wrath of God.
Sure.
Yeah, a lot of different things. I imagine.
Whatever.
Sure. In this matchup, I imagine he's going to go ahead and board in Magus of the Moon. Any sort of Blood Moon effect seems great in the matchup.
Absolutely. I mean, we saw in the first game, Rudy just can't beat it. He struggled on for a few turns, but he knows the writing's on the wall once a Blood Moon effect comes down.
Yeah, and that to me seems like the big one that he would like to board in. Outside of that, he may board in an extra Red Blast, but a lot of these cards are silver bullets for different sorts of strategies.
It's tough. The Red Blast, Rudy's deck is blue on the surface, but there's a lot of non-blue stuff going on here. So I'm sure Zachary wants some number of Red Blast and Pyroblast, but he may not want to cap out on it altogether.
Sure.
But I think the Spirit of the Labyrinth is a reasonable card to bring in against any sort of brainstorm ponder strategy.
Yeah, Spirit of the Labyrinth seems fine. It's good. I'm curious how that, that card seems great in Death and Taxes style strategies. In a lock deck, is it a hard enough lock for this matchup?
Maybe not.
My question.
Maybe not. And it does oddly make Rudy's Vendilion clicks more powerful in certain spots too.
Right. Yeah, he can click Zachary and Zachary won't get a card off them. We'll see here. So now Rudy on the play, I think he's benefited a lot by the fact that he knows what he's playing against. He knows that he'll need a card like Spell Pierce in his opener. Or at least he knows that he should value that a lot higher. Force of Wills, Spell Pierces, these are really important.
It does help, but his sideboard doesn't really give him a lot of ways to redirect his deck altogether. No access to basics or alternate mana sources, so it is helpful to be aware that Blood Moon is there, but there's not a lot that he can do about it, especially when Zachary has his most explosive draws.
Right. So see here, yeah, and as we saw, the first game took only about 5 minutes at most.
Yeah.
Games involving Painter Red tend to not be very fast, slow. They're over in the first few turns.
Rudy here with a little bit of local pride as Ruma shirt. I assume that stands for Rutgers University Martial Arts, as Rudy is a enthusiastic mixed martial artist. And yeah, I think Rudy lives about 10 minutes from the tournament site, so a local element to the proceedings. Rudy does a lot of traveling for the Open Series as well, obviously 22nd in our overall standings.
And we are in Somerset, so we're right around Rutgers.
Yeah, we're right nearby. I mean, it's if you turn right out of the parking lot, turn right on East Nav, and keep driving down, you hit it. So we're right there. And if you turn right out of the tournament site, turn right down to East Nav, and keep driving for a little bit, that's where you're going to find me after the tournament's over tonight.
At Rutgers.
Not necessarily at Rutgers, but in the mix, as it were. I got some locals to catch up with,
Yeah, absolutely.
I've only got so much time and a lot of demands on it. So
you're originally from New Jersey, currently living in San Diego.
Correct.
You taking any extra time to stay in New Jersey?
Yeah, I'm staying through next Tuesday. So yeah, I'm taking a while.
All right, well, our game 2 appears to be underway here. See Rudy with Swords to Plowshares, Brainstorm, pair of Brainstorms, True Name Nemesis.
And Rudy's got one of those hands which is totally acceptable on the surface, but provides no disruption or insurance against Blood Moon. So can he afford to keep this? It appears the answer is yes, but this is the type of hand that can get detonated really easily.
Yeah, he has Banishing Light for some of the other lock pieces. We'll see it. Same start by Zachary. It's Ancient Tomb into Painter Servant. Rudy at the ready with a Swords to Plowshares, but you're right, still not much insurance to Blood Moon. He has some insurance to Magus of the Moon, surprisingly, if he doesn't use the swords here.
Assuming he doesn't tap out. If his shields are ever down and he doesn't have a Death-Rated Shaman in play, that's it. I mean, it's Force of Will or bust.
We'll see. NC's going to go ahead and get Tundra on end step. It'll be interesting to see whether or not he hangs on to that Swords to Plowshares or whether he just swords right away. One of the problems is that by not swordsing right away, he's going to open himself up to all sorts of red blasts because Painter Servant has painted everything blue. Yeah,
and I like doing the Swords to Plowshares now instead of Brainstorming. He knows he has to plow, so look one card deeper and set up a better Brainstorm.
Yeah, and excellent draw there of a fetch land, so you can be able to Brainstorm with a fetch land up. He finds Snapcaster Ponder, another land, so he's going to go ahead and put a couple cards back. Looks like he's putting back looking at a land, I think a True Name Nemesis to shuffle away. And then he's going to go ahead and, rather than shuffling with the fetch land, he's going to shuffle away with a Ponder.
And the shields are down, unless Rudy draws Force of Will off of this. If Zachary has one of his Blood Moon effects, you can just about lock it up.
Yeah, and this is an honest play by Rudy. He could have left a fetch land up to represent having an answer to a Blood Moon, but the truth of the matter is he doesn't have an answer to it, and it's unlikely that Zachary would respect an answer even if Rudy had one.
Yep, correct. You don't play decks like Painter Servant respecting your opponent's ability to have things. You just let it rip. Just let it rip.
All right, land 3. What is the hate card? It is Magus of the Moon.
Ding, 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 ding.
And that's
all right, Rudy knows that he can cast nothing in his deck except for a Battered Skull and a Numazawa Chite. He's just going to let it go. Instead of suffering through the ignominy of being beat to death by a Magus of the Moon, which I like quite a bit.
Now, I have a couple